Howdy SEOmoz fans, welcome to another edition of Whiteboard Friday. This week, the second in our two-parter on correlation data for SEO and social media analysis. I'm really excited about this one. So we're going to be talking about very specifically a few of the really interesting things that we've observed from correlation data. So last week, if you recall, we talked about a lot of the basics of correlation data, showed some simple examples, why it's useful both in aggregate and when studying some of your own stuff. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of those big aggregate average numbers collected from thousands of points of data to see what predicts better rankings overall. And I want to be really clear, just to reiterate from last week. Remember that correlation is not causation. One of my favorite examples, the one I like to use a lot, is the one with dolphins. So dolphins swim in pods, and some of the ones that swim in the front of the pods have different characteristics than ones that swim at the end of the pods. Just like things in the search results have different features at the front of the search results, the top of the search results, position 1, 2, 3, than the things that are further down in the search results, 5, 10, 15, 20, right? And so we look at an analysis of what makes for front of the pod swimmers in both scenarios. And with dolphins, it's things like, well, they have larger dorsal fins and they've got stronger flippers, and they also have more damage, right? They've got like scars and pieces of glass or something like that, like cuts and scrapes in their flippers, right? So two of those things, the bigger dorsal fins and the stronger flippers, that probably is causal. That's what's causing them to be front of the pod swimmers. But the damage, is that really, right? It has a high correlation. It's got a good correlation with swimming at the front of the pod. Does that mean that more damage means you'll swim at the front of the pod? If we were to bash up a dolphin's fins, right, who's swimming at the end of the pod, would he suddenly move to the front? No, right? It's correlation, not causation. It's features that predict what people will look like up there. So when we're looking at things that are rankings, just remember this is correlation, not causation. And some of the features here might be things like damaged flippers, not stronger fins. So keep that in mind as we're looking at this. That said, let's talk about some of these cool things. So number one of the things that we saw last June, we did a big analysis of Google versus Bing and the different ranking factors, looking at correlation across 11,000 search results in both. So we had a very, very small standard error, so we can be very sure that these correlation numbers go across probably all of the search results at the time. And we looked at things like, number of linking root domains and the keyword in the title, the keyword in the domain name, document length. We looked at the length of the title and Moz rank and page rank and dozens of other features. And what we found was that Google and Bing are not so different. That in fact, on a lot of the SEO basics, the things that you would do for Google or for Bing are the same that you would do for the other engine. And that's really cool to learn because it means that we don't have to develop one site that's trying to rank well in Google, one site that's trying to rank well in Bing, and we do different things for different ones of them. No, in fact, these engines are really, really similar. And then, of course, we found out in January of this year that Google had been running these experiments because they thought Bing's rankings looked too close to Google rankings, and they were worried, and so they did this clickstream honeypot, and of course discovered that Bing was essentially measuring through Internet Explorer where people click after they perform a search on any engine, including Google, and Google got upset about this. But nevertheless, I think that says, oh, well, our analysis that these two engines are pretty similar, kind of verified by some other data, including Google people thinking, hey, wait a minute, these are looking really, really similar, right? So we get this big takeaway that, unlike the late 90s or even the early 2000s when SEOs used to build different websites targeting different search engines because they wanted different things, today we can really build one. That's a great takeaway. God, it saves us a ton of time and worry. Number two, Facebook shares are highly correlated with Google rankings. This was one of our takeaways very, very recently in March of this year. So just about a month ago, maybe a little less depending on when this Whiteboard Friday airs. You can see here, right, that Facebook shares are in fact, were our single highest correlated, number one highest correlated metric with ranking higher, predicting that you would rank higher in Google among all the things that we measured. And we measured about 150 different factors, everything from keyword usage on the page to link metrics to things like tweets and that kind of stuff. And those Facebook shares seem to have an incredibly good correlation, a correlation so high, especially in, remember, I mean, this 0.29 on a scale of 0 to 1 would not be that high. In a really simple system where there's only 1 or 2 metrics that predict, 0.29 would be probably kind of low. But in a system where there's supposedly 200 plus unique ranking factors, probably much more than 200 plus at this point, but in the system with that much complexity, to see one metric that predicts such a high correlation is extremely rare. In fact, we've only seen a few metrics that are up in that 0.29, 0.3 range ever in the history of looking at correlation data. And so we can kind of say, that seems like Google must be using these Facebook shares. Not necessarily directly, they might be getting more data from Facebook, but there's something going on there. And of course, Google themselves and Bing as well admitted in an interview with Danny Sullivan on Search Engine Land that yes, we use data from Facebook and from Twitter directly in our web rankings to help with our algorithmic search. So, Facebook shares, you can see that correlation. You got to be thinking as an SEO, how do I get me some of those Facebook shares on my pages, right? Number 3, we looked at one of the weirdest things to come out of our March 2011 data was the fact that no-follow links seem to have a positive correlation with rankings. And so one of the things we did when we saw no-follow links having a really high correlation was we went, oh, that's just weird. Maybe what's going on here is that no-followed links and followed links all have a high correlation with each other. And in fact, they do, right? So if you have lots of no-followed links, you tend to also have lots of followed links. So that makes sense. All right, maybe that's all that's causing it. But then there's this one weird data point. Well, there's several weird ones, but there's this one weird data point around the number of or the percentage of followed links having a negative correlation, kind of a strong negative correlation with rankings, which sounds weird, but it suggests that websites and web pages that don't have any no-followed links aren't performing as well as those who have at least some or some reasonable percentage of them. And you kind of think about it and you scratch your head like, what? Wait, does Google want me to have no-followed links? And when you think that way, just remember, correlation, not causation. So it's not necessarily that Google's saying, oh, well, this website doesn't have a lot of no-followed links, so let's rank them lower. That seems kind of crazy to me. I don't think that's the case. It's possible, but I don't think that's what's happening. What I think is happening is that people who do natural things, right? Normal websites, this is not normal, right? It is not normal to have a website that only has followed links. It's almost like, man, you must be doing something funny because normal websites earn links from no follows, right? They get linked to on Wikipedia, which is no follow. They have blog comments that people leave and point to them. Those are no follow. They have social media profiles. Almost all of those are no follow. People tweet about them. Those are no followed, right? There's all these no followed links that exist from sort of good places on the web where you would naturally be mentioned if you're a good website. So to have only followed links is weird. No wonder, right? I don't know what it is exactly. We don't know what it is exactly that Google's measuring here, but I'm sure they're looking at this, not at this, but at metrics that say, this website does not interact in its ecosystem. And one of the things that predicts those is no followed links. And that's why you see that negative correlation. So lots and lots of cool stuff, interesting data that we can take away from correlations, even though we know it's not causal. We can say to ourselves, this probably means, right? This probably means, oh, I better be interacting in the environment and I shouldn't worry about getting no followed links, right? That this is not going to hurt me. In fact, it might actually predict that I'm doing more good things on the web. In this case, right, it's saying, oh, you know what? I mean, Facebook likes have a much lower correlation because liking something on Facebook, clicking that thumbs up button is so much easier than sharing and actually posting to your wall. I know the like technically posts to your wall, but it doesn't show up in top news. It only shows up in recent updates. And so sharing, oh, that's a good behavior to start encouraging. Maybe I should be encouraging more shares than likes on my pages. And having this, right, the Google and Bing data says, oh, I can build one website and do a lot of the key basics that are going to be the same for all of them. So this type of data is incredibly useful. We love doing it. We plan on doing a ton more. If you've got requests for things that you'd like to see us do, please put them in the comments and we will be happy to try to measure them in the future. Hope this data is interesting for you. Hope lots of you start doing more correlation analyses, rigorous data analyses of this type. I think it'll be awesome if we, as a community, start to make a lot of our insight and our intuition a little more scientifically based, math-based. I'm very excited for it. All right, everyone, thanks for watching these 2 Whiteboard Fridays. We will see you again next week. Take care.